Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather, Devin Alexander, and whoever the fans want to see.
Yeah. Listen, I told you give them something visual, so you went ahead and made your own YouTube-based TV show. It's an array of IPAs and fighters on the road. Got a question? Put them in your comment section right below. Barbershop talk while you're sitting in your living room. Pacquiao, Mayweather, and we can't forget the brews. Coming to you live with the scoops like a ladle. Allow me to introduce the boxing round table. Yeah.
Rollo Jenkins, boxologist, Zone 6.
All right. Mic check. Make sure everything is good to go. All right, man. We sound pretty good. As promised, it's political season, so I just want to have mature conversations about something that's interesting. Um, boxing is, we do boxing, we do sports, and we do politics, and we do just life conversations, sociologies. We do all kind of stuff. Me and the gang, of course. Of course, it's just not just me. Shout out to my boy Big Phil Walker, Smoke, Rollo Jenkins, Wayne Talk, aka B Talk, Big Hill, Zoe Money, and the whole entire crew. You know what I'm saying? That rock with us. Shout out to Money Brown and everybody else that lock in. And we're gonna cook on politics again today. Politics 103. I'm running this one and these particularly by myself because I don't want anybody else to be caught up in whatever political disagreements they may or may not have. I wouldn't want anybody put on a hook for that. So this is just me expressing my political views because obviously we're in political season. First of all, football is over with. Shout out to KC because they won. And then we're headed toward a conclusion of the basketball season. And we're going to see how that works out. And for the most part, we just sitting here chilling and we good to go. All right. So as promised, yesterday we had the good cook. I was talking about the politics. If you go back and look at the video, it's called Politics 102. And we talked about some good shit. And I just gave you my position and my perspective. But at the end of the video, I said, hey, look, this is my position on the border. And I said, I stop it right there. And then I, killed the video. And then as promised, I'm bringing you my position on the border today. And I'm going to also talk about my issues or my feel for the Democratic Party based on some historical information and some historical data as well too. Maybe this could help you out, when it comes down to the national election this year. Maybe this can get you more involved in your local government and give you some information that you may or may not have known. Everybody seems to be in the politics now, which is good, but there's a lot of different perspectives, right? You got Charlemagne the God who's into it. You get Killer Mike who's into politics. You got T.I., Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro. You got a lot of guys and gals that are into the political spaces, and some of them may have agendas and, they have donors and support. You get it. You know how I go. And a lot of people tend to not like the system. But I'm going to open up like I always open up, and I'm going to say this. I believe that the system is absolutely perfect. I think the Constitution of the United States is probably the greatest written document outside of the Ten Commandments, in my personal opinion. So without further ado, let's talk about the border and my opinions and my thought process on the border. Um, First thing first is I would say this. I think the border issue is a easy issue to solve. I think it's one of those issues and one of those situations and scenarios that if you just come in with a little empathy, a little understanding, in a strong position, um, it shouldn't be too hard to resolve. So let's think about push and pull factors, and let's talk about the impact and the social position of what is and what ain't, right? The first thing we got to look at it, we break it down. We got to say, okay, here's what we have. We have people, humans from Mexico that are crossing over the borders into the United States. People are considering that to be A, illegal, or B, an escape. So you got two basic things there. So far, so good. No problem. People from Mexico crossing over the border illegally to some, or they're seeking a better life and a better opportunity. So now I got to look at this. What position do I believe is true? And what position is beneficial for the collective as a person who is in politics? And what should I think and what should I consider as a voter and as a current citizen of the United States? Which one is true? Which one am I in favor of? And how should I process this? And how should I look at this? Because a lot of people tend to evade politics because of the sensitivity of it. Makes sense. But you got to come out of that, because that is a trick bag placed on people in society via the politicians. So we have to separate that and see, what do we have in history? What has taken place before? What examples do we have to point to figure out what is and what ain't? So let's think about this. Let's start with empathy. Because if you're going to be president and you're going to be a person that is in the executive branch, which is law enforcement, okay, then we got to figure out what can and cannot happen. If you're the executive and you're the president, empathy is something that you want to start with. For me personally, I truly believe in people being innocent until proven guilty. So you come in, for me, with a level of benefit of doubt, a level of consideration. That doesn't mean because I give you that consideration and I give you that empathy, that doesn't mean that I'm void of security and precautionary measures. Doesn't mean that I'm opening myself up to victimhood. It just means that I'm receptive to your plight. And if I can help, I can help. If I cannot, I cannot. And that's what you got to determine. We got two things that's going on here with empathy, right? You will have some to say, you know what, these people should be able to come to America because, one, this land has been corrupted and taken over by all types of people. You have some people who will say, technically, this world belongs to everybody. We should be free to go and to come as we please. This country hasn't been founded on righteous and moral principles. This country has an influx of European descendants that have come over, the Irish from the potato famine, the Italians, the Spanish, so forth and so on. The Asians that crossed the Beringia Strait, the Africans that have already come over here through Central America, and the Africans during the Atlantic slave trade, right? And those factors contributed to what the natives and the indigenous people would consider encroachment on their land. So there's a whole bunch of perspectives on the morality of the establishment on this land and who could come in and who could come out. That's rightfully so. So when we go back to empathy, we got to consider that. What do we need to look at in a pile of empathy, right? Well, first of all, the Europeans should have empathy and consideration due to the fact that they came over to escape prosecution and persecution, and they came over with the promise of land and opportunity and a new way of life. They came over, and unbeknownst to them, people were here. The government and their established systems in Europe and Spain and Great Britain allowed them to take the risk and the voyage over here. Can't undermine that. Traveling the seas on wooden ships for a new opportunity is a hell of a jump. I mean, that's like saying, "Hey, man, who wants to go to Mars and colonize Mars just to find out that there may be a different race of people on there?" Man, you don't make that trip. Okay. Um, does it make it right or wrong? No, we're just combing through the information, and we're talking about how to consider empathy and be empathetic to people in their travels, in their plights. When the people from Europe came over here, you could say, well, part of the reason you came over here was because the Mongols had destroyed you and you could not go back to India or find new trade routes going farther east. So you were oppressed and you was blocked off from that. You already had suffered from the bubonic plague, from the fleas from the horses that bit the rats in Europe. So you were in a situation where you were really pressed against the Atlantic and you had no other way to get to India and to the other side of the world because the Mongols had everything in the stranglehold. And I want to talk about that just a tad bit because a lot of people underestimate the impact and the influence of the Mongols and how dominant that nomadic society was and how pivotal the Mongols and Genghis Khan were to pushing the Europeans through the Atlantic to find new trade routes because they wasn't going the other way. The Mongol Empire is historically known. We already know what Genghis Khan did. The Europeans just didn't have any answers against the Mongols, who were awesome warriors, who were destructive, who was powerful. Okay, so in a nutshell, let's just call it what it is. The Europeans, by the Asians, Genghis Khan, they get whooped up on. They got beat up on. And we all know that the Moors from Africa came up through Europe to kind of help clean them up. The Moors gave them the technology to circumnavigate the waves in the Atlantic Ocean. The Moors helped clean them up, introduced them to soap. The Moors helped kind of negate some of the effects of the bubonic plague, Black Plague, by the Mongols. So they had that assistance from the Moors. It's already understood that the Moors and the Africans had already commuted over to Central America because the butt of Africa, based on the currents, already naturally, inherently blow you from the butt of Africa. If you was just getting the sailboat, you will be able to be blown right into the Caribbean naturally, right? And then you will be able to do that from the Caribbean back to Europe. So it creates a circle in the Atlantic, right? Unlike the Indian Ocean, Indian Ocean, it changes per season. So you'll get 6 months to be able to flow out of the Indian Ocean into India, into Japan, into Indonesia, down to Australia. And then the season will change and then you'll be able to blow back in. That's why the Indian Ocean was very instrumental and huge as a port of trade, an entry in trade. That's why Africa and India has always been pretty powerful. Even Japan has always been powerful, and even China. So these are just historical, geographical events that allowed for the development of Mesopotamia, the Mediterranean, and even up into Europe as a byproduct of that. So the Atlantic, however, is just a consistent current coming off the butt of Africa right into the Caribbean. And the Moors introduced that concept into Europe after cleaning them up because the Mongols had them oppressed. Then you guys get the story of Christopher Columbus. We already know how that goes. So now we're here. 13 experiments, colonization, people were promised lands. And I could be empathetic to the Europeans in their travels across the Atlantic with all that going on. The Atlantic is not that's not something that's sweet. Yeah, we get there faster and we get, we got technology that allow us to kind of, get to and from quite, easily and comfortably, right? But you got to understand, back in 1400s to 1500s, 1600s, we're not even at the position of steam ships quite yet. We're talking about wooden ships. And you're talking about battling hurricanes, currents, all kind of stuff. These weren't massive cruise liners. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about to take food and supplies. We got to salt things. There's no refrigerator. There's no AC. You're just all weather based on whatever the circumstances is. And I can imagine a family from Europe seeking out new land and new opportunity in a new spot that's unbeknownst to them. They don't know. They don't know that Indians are here or indigenous people are here. They don't know that. They just thinking, hey, there's land. The government has said this is what it is, and I'm taking a massive gamble and packing my life up and starting anew. That's something to be empathetic toward. So when Europeans start talking about immigration, and they're not empathetic, that's sinister to me. Because of all people, Europeans should understand that need and that push factor, that pull factor to seek and discover into new land and new territory for opportunities. African Americans or Black or foundational Black Americans already understand that naturally, because African Americans and Blacks already understand that Blacks have been here. They get mixed up a lot with Indians and indigenous people because of the skin tone and skin color, but it's already understood that Africans have already circumnavigated the globe, and that they've been in the Americas for quite some time before Christopher Columbus. Okay, that's already understood. So now we're here. Everybody should have a clear understanding of traveling into new territory and the opportunities presented by that travel, which makes sense. So when I look at the border crisis, my understanding is that most of the people that has been in Mexico or in Mexico, they were here prior to generations before, generations and generations and generations. But of course, obviously America, when it grew and as it pushed westward, okay, it pushed westward and it kind of went through the South. You push those people back into Mexico, creating a border that boxed them out and pushed them down into Mexico. But we already understand that Mexico, in Texas and New Mexico and most of the central southern part of America was land by Mexico. And we pushed them back, right? Obviously, it is what it is. It happens. So that don't mean because you created a border as the United States, as a growing nation, that those people for generations and generations are complying and just fold and understand that, okay, they don't have any rights to this land. Because in their mind, in their psyche, look, we battled over this land before. We've battled over this before. So my ancestors had this. You guys just created a border that shouldn't necessarily be there. So we're going to take the opportunity to seize the moment if we can. Okay. Now the problem comes in is with the propaganda, because what happens, and this is my issue with Europeans in certain party, and we'll break down each party positions. There's a mindset in which the same pattern happens over and over and over and over again. I'll say this with African Americans. Let's use African Americans that got their freedom and attained their freedom from chattel slavery into Reconstruction, into Jim Crow, into the Civil Rights Movement, up into now currently neo-slavery. Now, the same thing is being applied to the immigrants that are coming from Mexico. What happened when African American men started to get their freedom? They start to over-criminalize them with propaganda. They started to suggest that the women and children weren't safe, and that somehow these newly freed savages should be put back in chains, or they don't deserve the freedoms that were bestowed upon them through the Civil War, which obviously the Southern Democrats, the South, was the people that uphold these values. A lot of resentment post-war and a lot of resentment toward black folks post-war. So there was a lot of false propaganda about black people, black males, black women, and black children as they attained their freedom as new citizens of the United States of America. So the same pattern is holding true now for the Mexicans. Now, that's not to suggest that there weren't African American men who got free to suggest that they weren't criminals. You're going to always have bad people, but by and large, African American men weren't criminals. That's not to suggest the same thing for the Mexican immigrants that are coming over the border. They're taking the same pattern, and what they're doing is they're taking 2 guys or 3 guys, and they're over exaggerating the criminality element to put fear in white people and to scare white people into building the same resentment over and over again. We've seen this story before. We've seen this with newly freed black people. They put out propaganda because of resentment and hate and made it a security problem. It's a matter of, guarding your homes, guarding your properties. You're going to be at risk with these newly freed guys. So we got to put in vagrant laws, right? They got to get these guys curfews. If these guys don't have IDs, we need to get them back locked up some kind of legal way. And that's kind of what is happening for and toward the immigrants. Now, is there criminals and is there a criminal class within these people who are seeking freedoms? Absolutely. Some scumbags in every culture. There was some scumbags that came from Europe as well, too. And you got to get that under control. But it's not millions upon millions upon millions of Hispanic or Mexican men or Latino men that are coming over here and they're engaging in criminality. Okay. And what happens is when you do that, you create this resentment and this hatred that white people latch on to, specifically poor white people, underprivileged white people, and you start to play this game of racism that most people try to, conjure up, which I don't think exists, because if you feel some type of way, then you need to neutralize whatever you feel that it is. Like, no one has the right to force racism on you or racist practices. If they feel some type of way based on how you look, then you need to put them in the dirt. It's plain and simple. As a collective, however you view that, however you heard that, it is what it is. It ain't nothing to exist. It only exists when you play the game and let it exist. When you start letting people beating you in your head at lunch counters, when you start letting people victimize you under that blanket of racism. Okay? But other than that, it's easy to neutralize and it don't have to exist. You can wipe it out if you actually fight back and counter that, which is pretty much easy to do. You just got to recognize it. If you even acknowledge it or spend too much time acknowledging it, which you just got to create a defense. So what I think should happen, in my opinion, and if it were me, first of all, there has to be empathy. And for those who are saying that this is a matter of national security and criminality, okay, put them to the side, put that in a pile, those people in a pile. You don't agree with it. You think that we should have strong borders. I agree with that. Let's put that to the side. Now, for those who are saying, hey, we need to give these people asylum. We need to give these people benefits. We need to let these people come into the country. We need them. They have contributed a lot to society. I agree with that. Let's put that to the side. So what we need to do first is we should go shore up the border without a shadow of a doubt. We should go down and take care of business first, okay? And we should shore up the border so we can get a handle, okay, on who and how and what the process is for people to come over here and contribute to the nation. Now, my suggestion is once we get a handle on the border, okay, and I do believe in a wall. It doesn't have to necessarily be like Game of Thrones, a big high wall that's 700 miles high and wide and all that kind of nonsense. It doesn't have to necessarily be a physical wall, but it needs to be a understanding and a secure metric that will allow America to slowly vet the people who seek asylum and refuge here in the States. Okay. There needs to be a security blanket and a level of respect for the borders of America. Now, it is established that the Mexican and the Latinos have a right, and there's some empathy there for me for them to come over. And obviously, we want to deal with the criminal class and check them because that's part of being a sound leader, and that's part of the executive branches to have law enforcement. They need to be communicated and understood that criminality is not something that's going to pour and usurp and undermine the people who are looking for asylum. It needs to be understood that white folks, you got to mind your business. This is a big problem that European descendants have, especially when they're poor. You got to mind your business. You're too involved in other races and in people's business. You got to stop that shit. Okay? Take a step back and look at yourselves and figure out what it is that you want, not at the expense of other people. What is it that you guys want? You want jobs, you want this, you want that. Mind your business. And the problem is that white, poor, disenfranchised people don't get told that enough for some reason. So with that understood and that established, the border should be secure. And there should be a proper vetting system that allows the Hispanic or the Latino population to come in properly and respectfully. Why? What's the benefit? Okay, first of all, they're already over here illegally. Okay, they're already here illegally. So why not just give them citizenship so that we can have a solid, strong, working labor class that will pay taxes and contribute economically to the government and the system? How do you think the government make money? The government make money off taxing income. The government makes money off the tariffs and having a surplus of exports as opposed to imports. Obviously, we know if that's backwards. If you import more than you exporting, you're going to have a deficit. But we need to figure out a way to export more than we import so that we can create a surplus. The way you do that is by creating a strong working labor class that can pay taxes and can contribute through textiles and ingenuity so that we can homegrown build stuff. Not saying we need to practice individuality, because there is a level of global trade and free market that has to happen now because we're advanced. This ain't the 1800s. Well, we just relying on industrialization, but now we're in a new world and we're in the future, obviously. So part of that future flow with economics is still having a strong labor class that can create jobs and maintain jobs here in the United States domestically, as opposed to shipping them things out, those corporations, into other foreign countries for cheap labor. Okay, so I think the Mexican or the Latino community should be given amnesty and given citizenship, and we can vet them, get them to where they need to be, put them in position so they can be successful. And then we need to create, obviously, the jobs for the support systems to allow that. And guess who should have those jobs and who most likely will get those jobs? African Americans. This is an opportunity for you to get those jobs in support of the immigration policy and the immigration flow. The same thing with white people, all the humanitarians, all the people who feel that, the Latinos should be allowed to come over. Okay, then let's get them organized and let's get them straight and let's vet them out and let's put your ideology to work. You can get paid for it and they can get paid for it and the government will get paid for it and we're good to go. Everybody is going to be satisfied and taken care of across the board. White folks will have jobs, black folks will have jobs, Hispanics will be getting citizenships and they will have jobs and they will be contributing to the government. And the government will be happy because the government will be making money and the government will have a strong labor class. Okay. That's just how that will work. It's just simple cause and effect. And all those that oppose of it should build systems and go down and support the wall. If you feel strongly about, hey, these people shouldn't be here. Okay, cool. That's fine. That's your thought process. So what you could do is you could contribute to the security aspect of the immigration policy if you feel some type of way. So all those who feel like, it's a big criminal situation, then you could go into that field to prevent cartels and, the military age men come over. You can go down and you could deputize yourself and you can go down there and support and fight that good fight. Right. And the same thing with the support systems. So if Latinos come over here and get citizenships, give them all amnesty and allow them to work for real instead of undercutting black folks, okay, then you wouldn't have this problem. See, now you bring balance back because these illegals are killing the working class white American and the working class black American because these people are cheap labor and they're not really truly paying taxes. They're just not accounted for. So if we can get them accounted for and get them where they need to be, again, economics works out. They're paying taxes now. And then they can be competitive and we don't have to get this undercutting and this undermining of cheap labor here in our own country. Now we can get everything on an even playing field. And now African Americans and white Americans don't have to be usurped or undermined in the labor force, in the labor field by cheap labor for illegal immigrants that are allowed to pour over the border with some type of bad, ill intentions from either party, regardless. Okay. So I don't think this is a Republican issue or Democratic issue. I think this is just a common sense issue. The Republicans tend to claim security, strong borders, criminality, this, that, and the third. They got to come off that. Okay. It's not about that all the time. The Republicans are turning people off due to the fact that everything is always criminality. Everything's always about dehumanization and the mischaracterization of people. And that's the Republicans. The Democrats are always trying to undermine black people and gain this possession of people. Okay. The Democratic Party has a bad habit of doing it. They did it during chattel slavery. They didn't want to pay taxes, okay, on what was considered to be property, which was people, but they wanted representation in the House, and they wanted to expand slavery to the West. And the Union said, no, you're not going to use slave power to continue to run the Senate and to continue to run the House and ultimately the executive branch and or the judicial branch. This shit got to stop. The South was not comfortable with that because they claimed that it was a way of life and that it was their divine right to hold African-American men, African-American women, and their children in chattel slavery to do whatever it is that they desired to do with them. Democrats have a bad habit of trying to possess people physically and introduce them to liberties that are non-productive and somewhat weird. Okay. The Democrats tend to have people come over under the understanding that you're going to give them non-productive liberties, such as sexual issues such as divisive rights between the sexes and breaking up a family household, and wasting money on incentivizing the destruction and the discord of the family home between the children and the father, the children and the mother and the father. Like the Democrats have this weird pattern that is just not effective and not efficient, and it's offensive. They just got a bad habit of doing those policies while also funding other shit outside of what they truly need to be funding and what they really need to be taking care of. And they just got a bad habit of doing that. And the Democratic Party has some issues right now, as we can see. So it's just real simple. Allow amnesty for the Latinos, vet the people that are here, clean things up, allow them to pay taxes so that we can get more money into the government, and allow them people to prosper and have the opportunities that they seek to have. We already have people that are undocumented that's here anyway, and we already understand that once one of them produce a child on the land, they're already here. So why are we going back and forth with this anger and this bitterness toward that fact when we could just go ahead and make all of them citizens, have them all paying taxes, and have all of them become productive members of society? The Republican Party is just having an issue with that because they want to take criminality to another level. They always want to demonize people, okay? And they always want to have this isolationist type of thinking that's not good for their party. That's why most people consider the Republicans to be somewhat racist, okay, as opposed to the Democrats, but they haven't switched. A lot of people think that they have switched. The Republican Party have always been that. They always want to use legislation to box people out. You know, they kind of are more so into the slave trading and making sure that black people don't get close to them from a capitalistic economic standpoint. And they still do that. They will allow some of the African Americans to come in and play ball, but it's got to be within restricted guidelines. The Democrats have always wanted to possess people and possess minorities and be too inclusive and be a little too familiar with the peoples or minority groups, you know, through sex and divisive rhetoric between the home and the disassembling of the home and the overly mischaracterization of the children and the little boys. You know, 3-strike rule with Bill Clinton. We understand Hillary Clinton referring to the black boys as super predators. You know, it's just ridiculous. You know, we understand all of that. And we understand the Democratic Party's position on possessing people and being overly familiar with people as opposed to giving them their rights and giving them what it is that they ask for. So the border crisis is truly quite simple. It's just that we got to figure out how to hurry up and get this stuff done, because we're just wasting time, because we need to really put a lot of other things on the table so that African Americans can go ahead and get what it is that they need out of this overdue situation from chattel slavery and Jim Crow and the failed state of Reconstruction. Okay. Black folks still haven't got what it is that they should get. And the civil rights movement is not that. The civil rights movement is just a catch-all for everybody. So there needs to be a scenario in a situation where once we take care of this immigration policy, we need to then go back and look at people that have been disenfranchised by chattel slavery. And then we need to look at the package for the black codes and the domestic terror that was placed on black folks specifically, because the legislation said that specifically, right? And that's not for white people to feel indicted, because the people who are here that are white now from European descent, they indirectly and or directly benefited from chattel slavery, but a lot of them didn't, and they have been impacted by chattel slavery as well too, because some of them was undercut, some of them were beat out by cheap labor that slave owners had. That's respectable. So all those impacted by chattel slavery should have some type of recovery package to some degree. But the domestic terror, the Jim Crow era, and this neo-slavery and the terrorism that was experienced during the growth of Reconstruction and the humiliation and the subjugation, that's a different entire package that Black people should be entitled to. You know what I'm saying? That's something totally different. So you got the impact of chattel slavery, and then you got the impact of Jim Crow, and and redlining and boxed out opportunities, running freeways through all Black neighborhoods, bombing of neighborhoods that was all Black, coming in disrupting Black folks in their progress, and then coming back to suggest that somehow they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So that's two different things, three different things, right? So the border crisis has already technically been solved if we look back in history and look at the ideologies and the practices and just look at where we went wrong before. We've already been through this, so we already have the answers. It's just that certain people, certain parties pervert the system in the branches of government, making it not as fluid as it could be. A lot of people blame systems, but I blame the people. Education is a system. It works if you have good teachers and good students. The legislative branch work perfectly if you have people out engaging in community, engaging people, trying to check the pulse of the people. The executive branch, the judicial branch, all works perfectly. It's just that the elected officials are the people that are causing issues and causing problems. So the system is perfect. It's just the people. And I'll say this. Let's look at this for example. Some data. Only thing you have to do, and this is my practice, you don't got to take my word for it. You got to take nobody's word for it. Just if you a person that's new to politics or you familiar with politics, you can just do your research and do what it is that you need to do to figure out what direction you should go on your own, or what do you ultimately want. Another thing that people got to start doing, in my opinion, is minding their business and figuring out what it is that they want from the government, as opposed to always trying to criticize new ideas, new policies, and undermine policies put in place for other people. A lot of people, when you ask them about their political position on a lot of stuff, when you look at these interviewers and these politicians in the media, and you ask them, "Hey man, what do you think?" They never have an answer until it's about someone else. Then all of a sudden they got all these answers because they want to deny Black folks from something. They want to deny white folks from something. They want to deny white women from something, Black women from something, Black men from something. Everybody always have a political view on the negative impact of it. As long as it's like people practice politics, hate politics. Like I don't have any ideas of what I want, but I don't want you to know what you want, and I don't want you to get it, which is ridiculous in itself. So the Democrats are currently in office, and this is just what has happened thus far. Biden proposed a bill for aid in Ukraine. So the executive president, Joe Biden, who was elected by the people, along with Kamala Harris, who ran on certain promises that they have yet to deliver, and they find themselves post-COVID. COVID's not an excuse. The Ukrainian war broke out under his watch, and Biden's solution to that was And I'm just giving you the information. You could make your own determination about that. Maybe you want to send aid to Ukraine. Maybe you think that's a good political move abroad. Maybe you don't. But Biden proposed a bill that would send aid to the Ukraine. When he did that, it went to the House. It went to the Senate. And that's how it ultimately got passed. Now, which party did what exactly? Okay. Well, if you go, you can look at certain notable people. Let's look at certain notable Republicans that actually voted for it. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody's not guilty. I'll read this to you, this information. Here are all 22 Senate Republicans who voted in support of the spending bill. This is the proposed bill for aid for Ukraine. And you can look this information up. Here are all 22 Senate Republicans who voted in support of the spending bill. And I'm going to just give you the notable names. Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky thought it would be a good idea to send aid to Ukraine. Senator Mitt Romney of Utah thought it would be a good idea to send aid to Ukraine. That's the way he casted his vote. Okay. Now, when we take a look at how many people said yay, okay, how many people said yay for the aid for Ukraine, we had 22 yays and we had 26 nays on the Republican side, right? Because the bill passed 70-29 in the Senate. So that's 99 people. We know it's 100 people in the Senate, but that's 70-29. Somebody didn't cast a vote, whatever the case may be. But 70-29 for aid for the Ukraine. So Democratic President Joe Biden proposed the bill for aid for Ukraine, which is a complete undermining of what the people need domestically, in my opinion. Okay. And in the Senate, okay, of the 100 people in the Senate, 22 Republicans said yay, 26 said nay. Some of those notable Republicans that said yay were Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney out of those 22. So those are the two most notable guys, which I find that interesting. And that was kind of wow. Now, of the 70 and 29 Democrats, 48 approved of spending money in Ukraine and sending aid to Ukraine, and 3 of them said no. One of the notable Democrats that said no was Bernie Sanders. So the Democrats, by and large, as a collective, the president from the executive branch and from the Senate, they decided to send that bill and approve that bill. So the Democrats, by and large, not to absolve Republicans, because it's not like no Republican said it. We got some notable Republicans that stated that they would be in support of the bill and the aid to Ukraine. I have no idea why, but that is what it is. Had to research that. But 48 of the Democrats in the Senate voted overwhelmingly to send aid for Ukraine. 3 of them said no. So this is clearly one of those things in which the Democratic Party supported. That's one of the reasons why I wouldn't vote for that particular party on top of the history. They just don't make sound, logical decisions to me as a person, as a voter. As I'm following this and keeping update on this, it just doesn't fare well, and their positions and their politics just don't align with my lifestyle. Republicans are not innocent. But however, they tend, because here's the thing: some of them said yay and some of them said nay. But at the end of the day, the Republicans, as a collective, ultimately voted not to send aid to the Ukraine, right? Okay, but those notable Republicans who are always talking about the Democrats just so happen to support the Democrats in their position. See, and you got to watch out for things of that nature, because you would assume that Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell would be opposed to something that Biden would suggest and propose, especially with foreign aid going to different countries. Now, you wouldn't find that, and then you'll hear them spin it. And when you confront those guys, they're all of a sudden not remember. But then they'll criticize Biden and play this game with the public as if though they're just opposed to everything that the Democrats do and that the Democrats are bad. And you got guys like Mitch McConnell and you got guys like Mitt Romney that are voting to send aid to a foreign nation as opposed to taking care of its people domestically. But by and large, the Republicans said no. The Democrats overwhelmingly said yes. That $54 billion could have been spent and used somewhere else. So I don't get into this wealth gap conversation and this poor and rich, because the politicians are taking money and stimulating or investing into different regions that is not domestic. That money could be used to create programs. That money could have been used in much needed spaces and or spots. That's my political opinion, man, and that's what I think about the border. I believe in it. You obviously don't want criminality. With that, you want to separate that. But I believe in giving citizenship for tax purposes, growth and development purpose, and the economic strengthening of the nation domestically. I don't believe and I don't support aid to the Ukraine due to it coming out of taxpayer money. We have a Social Security problem, Social Security budget problem that the government seems to be mishandling, but we find a way to stimulate and support the Ukraine with $54 billion in aid. Meanwhile, Social Security is on the brink of destruction and collapse. People, or a lot of people. Education is a concern for a lot of people and some people. So I just think we could have used that money in better spaces for our people here. And at least I would have used that money. If I'm going to think about a foreign issue, I would have at least used that money to get a tackle on my border, my southern border, as opposed to what Ukraine has going on. You know, so that's just my opinions. And that's my thought process on the Democratic Party. I'll keep you posted on what's new and what's hot. It looked like Donald Trump keeping some good steam, getting some good steam. It doesn't look like Biden is competent or as energetic as Donald Trump. I don't know what the outcome of the election gonna be. I can't tell you who to vote for. I'm not telling you who you should vote for. I'm just giving you some information so you could think about the political process all the way down to November. And I don't want to do this last minute, so I want to be more consistent further out, right? You know, just keep your eyes on the political arena. If you're not interested into it or you're not a big fan of it, I can understand that. And I do support people sitting out during the elections. I believe you shouldn't be pressured into voting because you don't have to vote for the national election. You can vote in your local elections, right? But part of that is understanding what your senators are doing too, because it ain't just on Joe Biden, as you heard. You heard some of the hard-nosed Republicans that tended to disagree with Biden and Kamala. They're voting for sending aid to Ukraine. Biden proposed it, and Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney, are supporting it, right? So they always say the right wing and the left wing are still still a part of the same bird. And that holds true for some of those guys. Some guys are Rhino, they're Republican in name only. Some are Dinos, they're Democrat in name only. And some of these guys are just on one side of the aisle as opposed to the other one because it's just an opportunity. But some of these guys have the same political viewpoints and vantage points as whatever's supposed to be their opposition. That don't mean they have to just always disagree. It doesn't mean just because Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney sided with Biden for aid to the Ukraine that they're bad guys. It's just that it needs to be understood, because what would happen is you'll get this back talk and you'll be like, whoa, hold on, you're criticizing Biden, but you also supported the proposed bill. Even though you could say the Republicans by and large agreed that it wasn't a good idea, but you can't let those guys fool you, because there's still a set amount of Republicans, and this is what they tend to do, and they got a bad habit of doing this. Some of the Republicans will vote for it and then pretend like those policies was bad, but they supported them. And then just because the collective Republican Party voted against it, they'll try to lump themselves in as a fail-safe. So I don't want to see Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell coming back later criticizing Biden and the Democrats for their vote in support for aid across the pond when you supported it, but just because the Republican Party in totality said no, you're going to say the Republican Party said no. It was the Dems who supported that, but you're one of the Republicans that supported it. See, that's the thing. Just because the Republicans as a whole say no in the House or the Senate, you still got to look at what your state senator voted for. And then now Mitch McConnell, and he's Kentucky, and Mitt Romney, he's Utah. He's not Georgia, right? He's not for Georgia. What I'm interested in, and you got to do for your state, is look at what your senator is doing per se your state, because my senators are different from your senators, right? So you got to watch that. You got to be careful. Your House of Representatives are different from mine. Georgia, I get to vote for those House members. I get to vote for my senator. The way my senators vote may not be the same as yours. So you have to do your due diligence and look at that so that you won't be misinformed or tricked or led to believe something that's not true, because your senator is a Republican and you just think that they're automatically going to vote this way because of the ideology of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. Sometimes these guys will vote in a completely different direction than you would imagine, but because the collective got a standing result, they'll go back and hide under that and say the collective got a standing result, but you personally supported it. That's dishonest. But however, but it's only dishonest if they say they didn't support it, right? But you got to watch it, because people will do that. It's like me saying I'm a Republican, and then again, just an example, I'm asking you guys for your vote, right? And people say, man, we don't support aid for Ukraine because we got domestic issues here. And I say, okay, man, well, I'm the Republican that can get it done for you. Give me your vote. Give me your vote. I'm a different type of Republican. I go in and cast my vote, and it says I supported the Ukraine and the aid for Ukraine. And then I come back and say, hey, man, the Republican Party as a group, hey, we didn't vote for that. We shut that down. We tried to shut it down. Look at the votes. And you'll be like, man, you know what, Zone? Thank you. That's good. And I'm like, phew. But the truth is I'm being dishonest because I actually voted to support it. It's just that the party as a whole bailed me out. All right? So that's it, man. We just hit an hour, and we'll close it down from here. I appreciate y'all guys for listening to me. We'll do more. I'll take suggestions if you want to ask me my position or my thought process on politics. I'm always welcome to take suggestions. I just want to, like, I look at Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro and these guys that's supposed to be these political wizards, Charlamagne and God. I see Stephen A. Smith interviewing Charlamagne and God. I just got some issues with some of the verbiage and some of the language that they're using to misinform people to a degree. And not to say that it's sinister, but it's just, we just want to make sure we get all the facts out there going into this election right here. And then some people are just going to vote for their feelings and they just don't care what happens. They just don't want to, and that's fair. That's what you're supposed to do. That's not, I don't have any problem with that. You can vote with your feelings. You can vote with your heart. You can vote with your mind, soul, whatever. You can vote for because your dad did it. That is your right to do. You earned your vote. You can sit in the house. I don't criticize anybody for their vote because the country going to be what the country going to be. I just want to make sure that people understand that look at people and stop looking at the systems, because the system is like I just described to you. You would imagine that a Republican would do X and a Democrat would do Y, but sometimes that's not the case. You got to get in the weeds and look at it, right? With that being said, man, I'm out of here, man. Hope y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Sunday with these politics.
Jenkins, Boxologist, Zone 6, Dre, BT Pound, 78 Fight News, Blood Boxing, Blood Fists, Boxing Beats and Rhymes, Female Boxing Fan, Carter J, Pull Counter, Joker Boxing, D Styles, the whole YTBC.